Hey, I Teacher Thoughts here coming at you with another video. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about greenhouse safety. Now, if you've missed class or if you're one of my YouTubers just watching along, we're going to go through this presentation and you're going to learn a little bit about the basics of greenhouse safety. Now, greenhouse safety is kind of a pretty broad topic. So we're going to kind of take a look at some of the lighter points of that. We're going to kind of do the 30,000 foot level. As we go on and we get to one of these topics, they're going to be a little bit more in depth and we'll show more of the tools or some more of the chemicals or the plants or other things that we're working at. But right now we're just taking that extra level, that 30,000 foot view of what we need to do to be safe in our greenhouse and greenhouse class. So the first thing that you're going to cover today is you're going to identify some items of personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE. With those, you're also going to learn the proper use of PPE. Now, for some of the PPE, there are certain things that you need to do that are not common sense, and we'll get into those when we get to that slide. Other than that, we're going to also look at safety data sheets, or SDSs. We'll look at greenhouse warning signs, what they mean and why you should read them. We'll also look at the hazards and other safety things that you have around our standard greenhouse equipment. And that's everything from the wheelbarrows you push through to the heaters and the other control systems. Then we'll go to our safe tool use. We do use tools in the greenhouse, although our most common use of our tools is our hands. We'll talk about our greenhouse code of conduct, and we'll also talk about the hazards that can actually come from the plants that we work with themselves. When it comes to personal protective equipment in the greenhouse, there are just a few things that we actually use. A couple of them we'll use on a daily basis. Some of them we'll use occasionally, and some of them, though they are a piece of personal protective equipment for the greenhouse, they're not something that you as a student will be using at this time. First off, let's cover safety glasses. Now, as you all know, I have my regular glasses, but there are times in the greenhouse where I believe that it's most appropriate for us to be wearing safety glasses. One of those is when we're working with our potting media. So when you're filling up baskets with dry potting soil, or you're filling up our 4-inch pots with potting soil, safety glasses are a good idea, because as you dump that soil into the wheelbarrow or into the pots, it can floof up into your face and you can get things like bark dust, peat moss, or even perlite in your eyes. And all three of those objects can actually be quite hazardous to your eyeball. And we'll have to do some cleanup of you were you to get that in your eyes. So flushing your eyes. So if you're going to be one of those students working on filling our containers, I do highly recommend that you grab one of our pairs of safety glasses, one of the ones that's issued to you, and wear those while you're working with our dry potting mix. Item number 2 is nitrile gloves. Now, for most of us working in the greenhouse, just our bare digits are going to be just fine for working in the greenhouse. So potting soil, plants, other things what we're doing generally won't hurt you. Now, some of you out there are going to be sensitive to some of the items that we use. You might be sensitive to the potting soil. You might be sensitive to certain plants that we're working with. And in that case, I would recommend that you grab one of the pairs of nitrile gloves. Go ahead and select the size that fits best for you and wear those throughout the duration of the task that you're doing. When we get into our PP unit, I'll also show you how to properly put those on and properly take them off. There is a technique to it. The next one is a dust mask. Now, dust masks are one item that a lot of people kind of see as a piece of personal protective equipment that is a personal preference, but this is really something that if you're working with a dry potting media, I do highly recommend that you grab one of the dust masks and wear that sealed completely over your nose and over your face. That'll prevent any of that bark dust, peat moss, or the abrasive perlite from getting down into your respiratory tract and causing irritation. The next one on our list is respirators. So respirators are that full gas mask that comes over your mouth, and it has cartridges in it Generally, they're like wider pink cartridges. If you think of like post-apocalyptic end of the world, wearing the gas mask or rioting, that's the kind of thing that a respirator, that's the kind of a piece of equipment you'd think about when you think about a respirator. Now with those are generally used with pesticide applications. So that would be sprays, fumigates, or dust that might be used as either an herbicide or a fungicide in the greenhouse. Now, you as a student will actually not be doing any pesticide application. So at this time, it is not required for you to wear a respirator at any time in the greenhouse. However, it is a piece of personal protective equipment that if you decide to do a career in this, I do recommend that you wear when it is required. The next two pieces of equipment are going to be your daily clothing or outfit that you bring to the shop space. Closed-toed shoes are always required in the greenhouse. This prevents you from getting your toes stubbed, getting objects dropped on them, and protects your feet and your toes from general abrasions or other things that you might encounter in our greenhouse space. Lastly, long pants are actually required in our greenhouse too. Benches, containers, wheelbarrows, plants that you're moving about, any of those can cause cuts or abrasions to your legs. The best way to protect against that is having a long garment that you're wearing, specifically pants, to protect your legs from any injuries within our greenhouse space. If you don't have pants for the day, please remember all of you do have lockers available to you, and you can store those pants in one of the lockers. As soon as you come in, go put those on if we're heading to the greenhouse so that you're ready to go. The next item of safety in our greenhouse course is safety data sheets, otherwise known as SDSs. Now, SDSs are a document that is provided by the manufacturer, and it is mandated by the government to be on any chemical that may have adverse effects on a human being. Now, with those, there are 17 different items that are covered on a safety data sheet. We're going to cover a few of those here, and then later on when we look further at safety data sheets, we'll break those down and you can look at individual things there that might be of concern. The first thing to notice with a safety data sheet is it's going to contain warning words. Now, these warning words should be a quick reference to you to give you an idea of how this chemical may affect you. It's going to start off with basic words such as caution. Caution being the lowest level of danger to you from that chemical. Next, it steps up to warning, and then finally it says danger. If it says something like danger on the warning label as one of your warning words, be advised that this means that this chemical can be of an extreme hazard to you, causing serious bodily harm and or even death. Make sure before handling any chemicals that you do fully read through the safety data sheet, paying attention to warning words. The next thing that you will find on a safety data sheet is your exposure limits. How much of this chemical can you be exposed to without experiencing adverse effects? It may be anything from a few milligrams to a few gallons, and knowing your exposure to that chemical and what hazards may be involved is very important if you need to seek further treatment from your exposure. The next section of importance is first aid. If there is an exposure to this chemical, what are the first aid steps that we should immediately do following the exposure to ensure that the individual and those assisting them remain safe? Toxicological information is also very important. This will give you an idea of how toxic this chemical may be to you, how fast it may act, the amount of times that you may encounter. Is it a hazard such as cancer or respiratory distress, defatting of tissue, things like that. So it's your toxicological information. It's going to tell you if you come in contact with this chemical, this is what it's going to do to your body. Next item of concern that we need to look at is what PPE or personal protective equipment is required in handling this material. It may be something as simple as safety glasses and nitrile gloves, or as complex as a full body suit, respirator, gloves, and boots. Knowing which PPE you're required or recommended to wear when encountering this chemical is very helpful in keeping you safe. Lastly is the cleanup procedure. Were this chemical to be spilled or the container is damaged, how are you to isolate or remove this chemical from the immediate environment? This can be as simple as sweeping up in a dustpan and tossing into a secure waste container, or as complex as contacting a waste containment organization and having them come and do hazardous material cleanup. Greenhouses, like many other structures on our school grounds, are going to contain informational signage on the exterior, interior, and throughout the structure that are going to give you information about hazards or other things that you need to be aware of while working in the structure. The first type of sign that you may encounter is a hazard sign. It may indicate things such as tripping hazards, low overheads, or pinch points where you may have any of your digits injured if you place them in the wrong location. The signage will also identify various locations, such as what building you're in and how it's to be identified to emergency personnel were there to be an emergency on site. Other signs that you may include or you may encounter will be things such as pesticide application signs. And that's what this sign right here is. This is a pesticide application sign. It's going to tell you danger that there are pesticides that have been that have been applied in the greenhouse, and it's going to contain further entry or information such as when the pesticide was applied, what the personal protective equipment is that is required if entry is necessary, and when safe re-entry is into that structure after the pesticide application. And we'll go over the pesticide application hazards in a later slideshow. The last sign you may encounter is something of a restriction to entry. It may say something such as staff members only, employees only, students not allowed, or other information about that, telling you that this is not a location in the greenhouse or in one of our working structures that you as a non-authorized person should be. Please make sure that you pay attention to all signage and that you do read them so that you're aware of the situations or hazards that may exist before or while you are in the greenhouse structure. As a student worker inside our greenhouse, you're going to notice that there's a lot of different pieces of equipment. 4 main pieces of equipment in there are heaters, exhaust fans, thermostats, and linear actuators. Students are advised to stay clear of these pieces of equipment and do not interfere with their operation. Keep your hands and fingers out of the protective housings to avoid personal injury. Students are also advised that the thermostats, which are placed 2/3 down the greenhouse, are designed to maintain specific heat and coolness settings inside the greenhouse. Students are not to interfere or adjust these thermostats. Doing so may cause a complete crop loss or damage to the plants themselves. Students caught adjusting these thermostats will receive disciplinary action. Throughout the semester, you're going to use many different types of tools to perform specific tasks in the greenhouse. I'd like to remind you to use only tools that you are given for that specific task while you are performing that task. Please do not bring your own tools or improvise while performing an operation. Doing so could lead to introduction of disease from contaminated tooling, injury to yourself, or injury or damage to the tools of which you're using. If you're using a tool that has a cutting or shearing action, you're reminded to cut away from yourself and always be aware of where your hands, fingers, or other parts of your body are prior to making a cut. If you are uncertain how to perform a task or uncertain how to use any of the tooling, stop and ask to be instructed in proper and appropriate use of the tools. In the greenhouse, you are going to be expected to hold yourself to a code of conduct. I'd like to remind you all that there is no running within the greenhouse structure, nor is there any type of horseplay between individuals. I'd also like to remind you that in the greenhouse, we are going to be using the appropriate language for a school setting. While you're working with others, share the work. Don't exclude others, share the work. All of us are here to learn, and all of us need to have the limited experiences that are available in the greenhouse setting. Share your knowledge. If someone missed another class, a previous class, or doesn't know how to do something, teach them how to perform the task of which you're doing. And most importantly, when you come to our greenhouse, always be prepared to learn. We're going to learn something new every single day. You need to make sure that you are there, you're alert, you're aware, and you're ready to learn. Most people understand that chemicals and machinery can injure you in a greenhouse, but many people forget that the plants themselves can be hazardous or toxic. With those, the adverse effects can come in many different forms and through many different avenues. That's something that we'll actually cover later on in the semester as we start looking at individual species of plant. However, students should be aware if you have allergies or other conditions that cause adverse effects to plants to please let me know prior to the beginning of the semester. Some plants have crossover allergens that may cause allergic reactions that you may not be aware of. A prime example would be our petunias. Petunias are in the nightshade family, so if you already have an allergic reaction to tomatoes or potatoes, you may also react to petunias. Please let me know if that is something that you have as a personal issue. I'd like to also remind you that many different parts of the plant can be hazardous or irritating. To mitigate those hazards, we use personal protective equipment, or we avoid purchasing or using plants that might have those hazards. Some of those hazards you may find in plants may be toxic sap, irritating hairs, or irritating oils. Prior to handling a plant, please do ask about the proper care and handling so that you don't experience any adverse effects. In conclusion, with this year, as we go along, as long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're working safe, we're working smart, we're working together, we're all going to be able to make it throughout the school year without being injured and being able to go home safe. Now, this is going to be a group effort, both on your part and my part, so please make sure that you do work with us as we do that to make sure we're all safe and we have a great year.